we'll start with some quick introductions. We're missing one person, and that is John Northrup. I don't know why he hasn't logged in, so we'll just go without him, and hopefully he'll join us in a minute. I texted him a few minutes ago, but my name's Al Dampier. I went to pharmacy school, did not want to be a pharmacist, but like that entrepreneurial spirit that pharmacists have, and went into the pharmaceutical industry before starting my first company in 1998, and have had several along the way. And including in the pharmaceutical industry, I learned how important having the right management team was. And I formed an executive search company, which is successful still to this day, along with several other companies. And there's John joining us. Thanks, John. Glad you're here. You may want to go ahead and unmute. But
I just had to be promoted as a panelist. That's all.
There we go. So anyway, I started a global executive search company in 1998. We work in life sciences, and particularly in the financial industry, and work with boards and senior level executives to make sure you have the right team to be successful. So glad to be here today, and we'll just go around the panel. We have a couple of guys in the office, so we'll start with Tom and Scott. Would you like to introduce yourselves, please, gentlemen?
I'm Scott Roloff, president of IntegerHealth. We're a healthcare technology company, analyze health plans, workers' comp programs, wellness programs.
Thomas Farb, I spoke earlier. I'm CEO and co-founder of Thrive Bioscience, a company that's automating cell culture and tissue culture. It's the 17th company that I've founded.
Tom, could you hold the microphone a little closer to you? A little hard to hear over the...
Sure, sorry about that.
Thank you.
I'm CEO of Thrive Bioscience, and I've started 17 companies, most of which have been in life sciences, and most of which have combined multiple fields, and most often AI, data mining, and healthcare.
Thank you, Tom. John.
Yes, thank you. John Northrup, CEO and co-founder of Stingray Therapeutics. We're the first company to target the direct negative regulator of the STING pathway, a major pathway in innate immunity. And we're going into the clinic next year. Very excited to be here.
Thanks, John, and congratulations on your progress recently. Max, glad you're joining us this afternoon from the Bay Area.
Yeah, Al, thanks for inviting me, man. I really appreciate it, and, grateful for the opportunity. So my background is in, pharma and research and all that good stuff. But we are a computational drug discovery, neuroscience, target ID company. And so essentially what we do is we identify targets for neurodegenerative diseases. And then we use machine learning, and AI means a lot of things in this world, but we use, AI to basically design the best compounds for that given target. And then we basically work with pharma partners to take those drugs into the clinic. And so, data in our world is gold. And so we do a lot of sequencing of brain tissue and things like that. But ultimately, our goal is to, create therapeutics for neurodegenerative disease.
Thanks, Max. Glad to have you here. So let's just jump in. And there's been a lot of change in healthcare with COVID and vaccines and trying to rush to market, and some of the cell technology that's going on, Tom. So let's lead with you. Why don't you bring us up with some of the changes that you've seen in the marketplace and how you're adapting to those changes with your cell technology?
So COVID has obviously had a huge impact on the system, on research. It's accelerated digitization. We already are sitting on petabytes of data, but we hadn't really looked at interactions before and real world data. And for this time, we were putting together different data streams to try and understand public health. And I think one of the impacts of COVID will be not only digitization, but an improvement in the collection, in surveillance, in public health, in the use of real world data. Also, supply chain and manufacturing was highlighted, and that is incredibly important. I think we're going to see more attention to driving down costs, to speeding up the manufacturing and logistics, because it was certainly pointed out with COVID, the importance of that. And COVID also pointed out the issues of equality, equality of access to care, driving down costs, and increasing production yields goes a long way towards solving those problems. So those were sort of COVID specific. I have others, but I'll let someone else speak.
Yeah, that's a good place to start. Let's one of the things I like about this panel, we have a lot of talent in new areas, and let's go with the new for the moment and stay with costs. I know, Scott, that costs are really important in healthcare, whether it's vaccines or oncology or neurology or whatever we're talking about, and you're looking at data in an interesting way. Why don't we start with that a little bit too?
Sure. In healthcare, everybody knows what they pay for their healthcare. Nobody knows what they get in return for that money. And that's the problem that we solve. At IntegerHealth, we actually quantify healthcare outcomes for health plans, insurance companies, employers. We actually put a dollar and cent value on it. We started the company several years ago. Our primary founder is Dr. Jack McCallum, and Jack was a neurosurgeon, premier neurosurgeon here in the Metroplex for about 30 years, and then he began founding, building up, and selling healthcare technology companies. IntegerHealth is actually his fifth one. The one right before us was a company called Senseo Health. You've probably heard of it. It's since changed its name to Signify Health, and it was really recently sold to CVS for $8 billion. So Jack has had a lot of success in healthcare and healthcare technology. Now in healthcare, you all can tell me what you spend for your healthcare, your health plans, your wellness programs, your workers' comp. But you can't, like I said, you can't tell me what you get in return for those dollars, the dollars that you spend for the doctors and the hospitals. Today, we try to measure that return in terms of quality, which of course is a qualitative measure, not a quantitative one. And it focuses on process. What did a doctor do or didn't they do? Did they follow clinical-based guidelines? Did they follow the HEDIS checklist, which is just a checklist of things that a doctor should do in certain circumstances? For example, if the doctor's seen a female patient above a certain age, did she make sure she had a recent mammogram? Another qualitative measure is, did the patient even like the doctor or the healthcare experience? The input into that healthcare equation are the claims dollars that we pay to the doctors and hospitals. The output needs to be in dollars and cents too, so we can compare the two back and forth and actually calculate our return on investment. And we need to measure what really matters, and that's the outcome to the patient. Did the patient get better? And if they did, how much did it cost and how long did it take? And that's what we do at IntegerHealth. We actually quantify a healthcare outcome. We put a dollar and cent value on it. And then we can do that across diagnoses, providers, plans, programs. Depending upon who we're working with, we have two ways of doing it. When we're working with an employer, we actually combine two different data sets, the medical and pharmacy claims and the employer's absence records, how long the employee was off work. And we define a good outcome as an employee being at work. And then we calculate the risk-adjusted total cost, claims, and those medically related absences to get and keep the employee at work. A lot of times we're not going to have those absence costs match up against the claims. We're just working with an insurance company like a Blue Cross, or we're looking at the dependents in their employer's health plan because they don't have any absence costs. And in that case, we use just the claims and we calculate the risk-adjusted claims per day to keep someone healthy. So that's what we're doing.
And Scott, where are you getting that data and those claims?
We get our data from our clients.
So you're using their data, and I'm sure it's being HIPAA scrubbed?
Oh, gosh, we've got, in fact, we maintain our own data on our servers, and we've got it so locked down. We're working with a couple of international companies right now,
Right.
but our servers will not accept traffic from outside the US. We have to use our personal emails to communicate back and forth. One is Ontario, the large workers' comp insurance bureau in Ontario. Another is Gympass, the international SoftBank portfolio company.
Well, yeah, and I asked for a specific reason. You may be aware that there's a large healthcare company that just had 3 million lives that got exposed. All of their data, it wasn't scrubbed, and it's been in the news a little bit lately, especially in healthcare. So it's good to hear that you're doing that. John, you've got some new stuff going on in your organization. Congratulations. And well, why don't you just tell us a little bit more about what's happening and bring us up?
Well, thank you very much. Maybe I could just share one slide
Sure,
while I'm talking here, and I'll talk a little bit about Stingray, and then we can talk a little bit more about what's going on in general. So the Stingray is on the other end of the spectrum from our last company.
Let's see, I just froze.
New therapeutics and in immune oncology. In
Hey, John, you kind of cut out there for a sec. Could you repeat the last like 30 seconds?
And I have nothing showing on my screen.
It
Try,
might be better to be on a hardwired network instead of wireless.
is everyone else seeing it?
No.
I just see it. He's started screen sharing.
Okay, good deal.
You know what we could do? We could just try, maybe I could try sharing your document and maybe it'll work on.
I have the document. I'm not worried about it. I just want to make sure the audience is seeing it.
Turning off the camera might help.
I'll turn mine off. John, are you frozen? All right, we're not hearing John, so I'm going to keep moving on then. Max, let's move to you until we figure out what's going on with John. And
Sure.
And maybe Marty, since you're hosting, you can stop the sharing for a moment. But you mentioned AI and technology. Scott was talking about technology, and technology is really important in healthcare with everything that's going on, from remote patient monitoring to remote office visits now and stuff. But you're taking a novel approach with John. We got you back. When you screen shared, we lost you, but we'll come back to you in just a second. When you with your company, you're taking a novel approach to drug discovery. Why don't you share a little bit about what you're doing in that regard?
Yeah, definitely. So I don't want to dive too deep into the weeds, but the first generation of drug discovery was high throughput screening. And, that's been around for 30, 40 years. You essentially guess and check, based on a compound library, right? Probably 10 or 15 years ago, a couple of companies emerged. Maybe you've heard of them, Atomwise, Recursion, that are doing some very cool things. But essentially what they're doing is they're still utilizing a compound library in order to, ultimately they're using AI to accelerate that screening process, but they're still limited by, whatever compound library they're choosing to use for their given, oncology or immunology or whatever, right? And so what we're doing instead is we're saying, screw the compound library approach, screw the high throughput screening approach. We want to take a really fresh look. Like if you are developing a drug discovery engine in 2022, how are you going to do it differently, and how are you going to make it, orders of magnitude better than how pharma is currently doing it? And so what we're doing is we're doing a generative chemistry approach. So essentially what we do is, and I can kind of get, there's sort of two sides to our coin here, but essentially here, also, maybe if I share a slide, maybe it'll work.
We'll try this one more time and see if a slide works.
Yeah.
Here we go. Keep your fingers crossed.
Yeah, keep your
get your bets down.
Pray to your God, cross your fingers.
The roulette wheel is going around.
Can you see that?
Oh, that one worked. Great. Yes.
All right. So this is a general overview of, sort of a comparison of how pharma typically designs a drug. So you have a huge compound library, 1 billion compounds or so. You run it through various phases of high throughput screening computationally. You design a lead compound, and then ultimately you take that compound into the clinic. And so what we said was, how we're only a year old. We're currently, we raised a pre-seed round. Now we're currently raising a seed round. And we take a generative chemistry approach. So we've trained our models on millions of approved drugs, not millions of approved drugs, thousands of approved drugs, thousands of unapproved drugs, and various other parameters to basically design, rather than just pick a molecule out of a library, to design it from scratch. And so the lead optimization is built in. And so in a way, it's sort of like shopping on Amazon. So, you go and you say, okay, well, our company focuses on neurodegenerative disease. So I have Huntington's. I want to target the Huntington's, HT protein, right? And so I say, well, I want to have X, Y, and Z characteristics. I want it to hit, with this type of target specificity, with these blood-brain barrier permeability settings, liver tox, patentability, that sort of thing. So essentially the drug that comes out is, it's ready to go into that early stage in vitro testing. On the other side of the coin, we're designing a whole cell model of neurons and glial cells and things like that to basically take in a bunch of genetic data, and we're working with Illumina out here in the Bay Area to sequence, all types of brain tissue, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, frontal temporal dementia, things like that. And then we're also doing age and sex match control.
And Max, you're from Texas, but you're in the Bay Area.
Yeah. I'm originally from Portland. Moved down to Austin for college, took a Warrens.
Right. What are you doing in the Bay Area?
And so what we're doing is we're working with Illumina and a couple other companies basically to create a huge, petabytes of genetic data for, a myriad of,
Right. Thank you. That's what I was trying to get to. You're doing some really interesting work with Illumina there, and they're taking a strong interest in your company. And I just
definitely.
want to make sure that
And so,
yeah, can you stop screen sharing? I want to move along just a little bit.
Well, I was just going to show this, so super, if you don't mind.
Sure,
so
go ahead.
How pharma typically does it is the gray line, and so that's about 2,500 compound hits in the day. And this is Chiron, which is our proprietary compound generator, which is 35,000 hits in a single day. And so what we're doing, like the AI that we're applying to this, is creating compounds faster and more accurately than, how pharma companies typically design their molecules. Anyway,
thank you, Max. So I want to stay with this trend of talking about AI technology in healthcare and how that's making some of the changes, because everybody on the panel has a lot of expertise in that. And John, since your company, you have an oncology biotech product in making progress, are you still with us? If you want to talk about your drug discovery process and how you, the only compound in your with your targeted therapy, maybe you can segue into that, and then we'll circle back around into technology and AI.
All right, thanks very much, Al, and I apologize for the problems that I had earlier.
It's technology.
I'm just going to stay off of video to make sure that my connection is stable as possible.
Thank you.
So we're in immune oncology, and immune oncology has been in a very interesting position, and one I think that can take advantage of all these new technologies to get us to the next level. But we've really been stymied for the last 5 or 6 years because all of our therapies are in just one arm of the immune system, adaptive immunity. That's the T cells and antibodies that we fight with. But there's another major arm of the immune system that we've been unable to drug to help. And cancers block both arms. This other arm is called innate immunity. It's in every cell in our body. And its primary purpose is to create local interferon, which is your first fighter and kind of do line for infection and cancer. And nobody has yet been able to bring a therapy to bear that activates innate immunity when cancer has shut it off. And as a result, immune oncology can only work in about half of the cancers that exist. The other half are very good at shutting off innate immunity. And when innate immunity is shut off, our therapies in adaptive immunity don't help. So we're really tackling that problem very directly. And we're working on negative regulators of the primary pathway in innate immunity, which is called the STING pathway, stimulators of interferon genes pathway. And our compound is doing very well. The big challenge for us, as for many people in these tough times, is fundraising and keeping the programs moving forward. And so what we've been doing is we have been doubling down on our, we were delighted to pick up a $2 million direct to phase 2 SBIR just last month and get it accelerated to last month from January to help us move forward, get our IND filed and get going into the clinic. And then at the same time, we have been able to raise money. And rather than raising money with a lot of new folks, we've been able to do some of that, but we've really been able to kind of double down with our existing investors who believe in the program and have given us access to their investor networks and really helped us move forward. So with that, we've been able to keep the program moving, and we're looking forward to starting clinical studies next year, demonstrating proof of concept in the clinic, and then doing the other things that pharma really wants, which is showing a clear clinical study path to accelerated approval and to a substantial market that the pharma can access. I would just say to everybody in the room, you know, these small biotech companies like us and some of the other people on the panel here today, this is some of the best value investing you can get. You know, start with a small program and turn it over to a big pharma who buys it lock, stock, and barrel for acquisition. Thanks, Sal.
Thank you, John. Yeah, partnerships is a good thing to discuss also. So let's come back to the in the office, and I hope you guys aren't close to 35. I'm trying to figure out where your view is looking at your background there in Dallas, but we're talking about technology a little bit, and certainly that's important, Tom. I know it's important, the organizations that you founded. We've talked about that before. Tell me where you see technology going with your current organization and perhaps even a broader viewpoint.
So obviously we're trying to get more out of the data that we have sooner, because it's more expensive if we discover a mistake later. And we have just huge amounts of data that's available that really hasn't been taken advantage of. So in the area of cell culture and tissue culture, there's a lot going on. So having better disease models so that we can study things computationally, so that we can study it in a, for instance, an organoid or an assembloid, which acts more like a tissue, gives us more data sooner and cheaper. And there is an important piece of legislation that passed in September, the FDA Modernization Act. And for the first time, a drug can move into the clinic without animal data. So you can actually use tissue data, cell data in place of that. So, you know, in general, the importance of data is increased. The importance of not just studying a single cell, but studying more of a system or a whole organ. And where this is important is we're basically treating tissues. And oftentimes it's an organ. And there's technologies such as stem cells where you can repair an organ. And there's actually an amazing amount of money that's being spent by the federal government on bioprinting, bioengineering of tissue. And a lot of it's being spent by the Army. And I had the opportunity to ask a four-star general why they're spending about $1 billion on tissue engineering a year. And his answer was autonomous vehicles. Now, I didn't figure out the connection, but the connection is that with safer driving, we're going to have fewer car accidents, and 80% of organs come from car accidents. And so the ability to actually produce tissues or to repair an organ is increasingly important. So for instance, use of stem cells, there's been success with in diabetes to get cells to start producing insulin again. So repairing the organ or replacing it is increasingly important. So I think, for a lot of reasons, tissue engineering is going to be one of the most important technologies for both drug development as well as for solving medical problems.
And is that going to be AI based as far as technology, or is there a specific way that tissue will be done? Is it bench work, or how is that done?
So one of the things, I didn't want to advertise what Thrive does, but one of the things that we do is create data sets that just haven't been available ever before in live cell biology. It's sequencing is really studying something that's dead. DNA is a chemical compound. And so the data that we're collecting is really massive. It's terabytes every week. And so use of AI, and I'd like to combine data mining with that. There's just huge opportunities. So correlating data that we have from several different points of view, and also just the handling of this quantity of data is really impossible without some tools. We have all these petabytes of data, and sometimes the most important is to correlate what we know at the cellular level, what we know at the genomics level, what we know at the tissue level, and then what we know at real world. And some of the really interesting solutions are coming about from finding biomarkers by using patient response data with biomarkers, two completely different stages. So there's just tremendous power in merging of this data, mining it, and being able to intelligently look at it. There are not enough biologists to possibly handle all the data. You could say that across a lot of professions. And so there have to be tools. And I think some of the most interesting companies, one of them on this panel, is really mining data in new ways.
And there's, to your point, there's a shortage of talent in many areas, especially in healthcare and life sciences, and it's just getting worse. Let's stay with that theme of data mining and the use of data, Scott. And again, you're using healthcare data in a novel way to affect outcomes and to show real costs. So how are you getting your data, and what are you doing with it? And speak to the technology aspect of that a little bit, if you will.
Sure, we get our data from our clients. And when you can quantify a healthcare outcome, you can put a dollar and cent value on each one. You can do all kinds of things to drive down costs while improving the quality of care that you couldn't do before. For example, now you can rank things. You can, who's the best primary care doctor in your network based upon their outcomes for taking care of diabetes? Who's the best surgeon for knees? Are you getting better outcomes by sending your back patients to physical therapists or chiropractors? Everybody has case managers taking care of their chronically ill folks, their high-cost claimants. Who's your best case manager based upon the outcomes that they're getting for those patients, both overall and by diagnosis? And the workers' comp front, same with the workers' comp adjusters. Now, every insurance company and plenty of other companies will rank doctors. They'll all tell you who their best doctors are. But you have to come back and ask, well, how are they determining that? And it goes back to those qualitative measures that I talked about in the beginning. Process, is the doctor following clinical-based guidelines? Do the patients like the doctors? I know one company that ranks doctors based upon how much of a physician's practice they spend on a particular diagnosis. So if a physician spends a lot of time treating diabetic patients, they assume they're good at diabetes. We actually measure the actual outcome. Did the patient get better? And if they did, how much did it cost and how long did it take? Now, there are all kinds of other.
Scott, do you ever overlay the qualitative measures as a comparison or as an additive?
The clinical, we have not overlaid the clinical data yet. We don't even ask at this point. Our patents allow us to go forward and then cover this. But you notice I didn't ask, what did a doctor do to get the best outcome? We just quantify the outcomes the doctor got. Our next step in our patent applications are to say, okay, these are the best doctors for treating diabetes, and these are the worst ones. What are their best doctors doing to get those better outcomes? We found in a Medicare Advantage plan down in Puerto Rico, where they have a lot of diabetes, that the primary care doctors getting the best results were the ones that had the most time spent in their evaluation and management codes. They were spending the most time with their patients. The ones that were getting the worst results, most of their costs were in pharmaceuticals. They were prescribing a lot of drugs. So you see the differences between the two. But right now, we're just focused on what are the outcomes that a doctor's getting. And then we can steer folks to those better doctors. A lot of things you can do to get folks to the better doctors. The best thing you can do, of course, is to just design your plan to include the best doctors or exclude the worst ones.
So who's most
Depending upon who
interested? So who's most interested in your data? Is it the employer health, the private pay big companies, or is it the managed care plans, or is it the end consumer Medicare? Who's most interested so far?
It's anyone who pays for healthcare. Our clients include employers, self-insured employers. You have to be self-insured because you have to be able to give us that claims data, and you only own that claims data that give it to us if you're self-insured. It's insurance companies, Medicare Advantage plans,
Right.
Multi-employer plans. Anybody who pays for healthcare has an interest in getting the most they can in return for their healthcare dollars that they spend.
Speaking of Medicare Advantage, I'm sure everyone saw that the word Medicare Advantage is being challenged now since it's confusing with Medicare, which makes a lot of sense. But we only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to go around the horn. Take 30 seconds or a minute and just see where the future of your organization or the future of healthcare going. Anyone can start. Who would like to start?
I mean, I can take it.
Sure, Max.
Sure. I mean, that's pretty straightforward for us. One of our co-founders is a computational physicist, and we see a future in the relatively near term, 5 to 10 years, where we can train all of our algorithm. We can train some aspects of our algorithms on quantum computers, and which will drastically, increase both the speed and accuracy, that we're able to A, identify targets, and B, create drugs, for those targets so we can take them into the clinic faster. Because, ultimately, creating a drug, as you all know, getting a drug into the clinic is a long, arduous, expensive process. And, if you start early with some really great compounds, you're going to pay dividends down the road. So
Thanks, Max. Going around the horn, John, last words. Where do you see
Sure.
oncology going?
Thank you. Well, we're very excited. We see proof of concept in the clinic for our first drug, and we think that's going to go very well. And then we have line of sight on several of the things that we want to do in the innate immune space that we think would be fairly dramatic improvements even to that. So that's what we're going to try to be doing.
Thanks, John. And Scott, where do you see the future going?
Well, one of the hot topics is just population health, employee wellness. We see a lot of wellness programs. Wellness programs are ubiquitous. All employers have these wellness programs, diabetes management programs, your general fitness programs. These employers know what they're spending on all these programs. They have no idea what they're getting in return. We actually published an article in the peer-reviewed Journal of Total Rewards a couple of weeks ago on how to calculate the return on investment on a wellness program. The wellness vendors are going to spit back to you metrics that they want to show that their programs are working for a diabetes program or that employees' A1C scores going down. That's great, but that doesn't mean anything to an employer. The only thing that means anything to an employer is for the employees participating in that program, did their medical and pharmacy costs go down? Did their medically related absence costs go down? And from that, you can calculate a true return on investment and figure out if those programs are working or not.
And I hope they realize that affects their premiums as well. That's a whole nother topic. Tom, last words, wrap us up, take us into the next hour with Marty.
So we're seeing incredibly exciting research that's being done in what would be known as regenerative medicine, which includes stem cells, cell engineering, gene engineering. And I think that that is going to, for decades, give us new therapies. We're really at the early stages of understanding. But you look at some of the drugs that we've had, for instance, CAR T, where we've actually had cure rates of 80% in cancers. And that's a great example of what basically editing the cell can do. And that's going to take lots of data, which we hope to provide.
Thanks, Tom. Well, thank you to the panelists. Marty, I haven't seen any questions pop up, so we'll pause for just a second and see if there's a question or two from the listeners, the audience. Do you have any questions, Marty?
Give me 1 second here. So, some things I would like to know is, when you look at healthcare from a holistic point of view, so people are talking about deglobalization, but I don't see sharing of information deglobalizing. I see, this vast amount of computerization that's happened, just continue to enhance the effectiveness of healthcare research. Where do you guys see that going? If you can spend each, 30 seconds on that or a minute and talk about, because obviously I think healthcare has made major strides because information is shared so much more readily than before. Any thoughts?
I can give you a really quick answer to that. I think in all the conversations I've had out here in Silicon Valley and elsewhere, data is held as tightly as people guard their children. And so I think the idea of I mean, obviously, like, scientific research is shared and whatnot, but a lot of that underlying, genomic data or patient data or biomarker data or, whatever it may be, everybody likes to keep it to themselves because, if it's all out there, you sort of, if you're Roche, for instance, if you have all this patient data, you have a, competitive edge and a little bit of leverage, in the marketplace. So I think maybe at some point, but I think probably not in the near term, despite the fact that that'd be great for the industry.
One of the things that is a constant problem in healthcare, at least, is data defragmentation. We've got all this data out there, but it's all in different silos, and you can't get the data in one area to relate to the other. And that's what we specialize in. We bring in all different kinds of data. We bring in medical and pharmacy claims, and employers' HR records, where the outcomes of those claims will live. A lot of times what you can do, if you can get different data, you'll have questions in looking at one data set that'll be answered in another. But the problem is that these different data sets are siloed and not brought together. If you're an employer, you've got a TPA taking care of your medical claims, you got a PPM taking care of your pharmacy claims, that's 20% of your spend, and the two don't relate. No one puts them together. Then you have the employer HR records, you have employer healthcare records where the clinical data is stored. All of these are kept separate and they're not merged together.
So I have a comment, Marty. I think there is increased globalization of data, and it's happening more rapidly recently, and a lot of it is because of COVID. For the first time, we really understood how connected we are. There was sharing of protocols, of variants, unlike we've ever seen before. And I think that's going to continue in other areas. I think a second trend that's affecting globalization of data are regulatory authorities for basically drug approvals. There has actually been a reversal of the trend of everything has to be done for clinical trials in this country. It's a more global approach. And in fact, all of the regulatory agencies in at least the industrialized countries are focusing more and more on diversity of the population. And so in fact, there's actually encouragement, since people live everywhere and have the diasporas all over. There's a requirement to have diversity in trials, which sometimes it really can only be met in another country. So I do think we're seeing increased globalization